Welcome to the Intercept Live. My name is Benjamin Dixon, and I am your host. Thank you for joining us in this ongoing conversation where we discuss the news of the day, the pressing issues, and a deep dive analysis with guests, with journalists, with professors, and anyone that we can use to enhance the conversation and push the dialogue forward. We also want to hear from you, the viewers. So throughout the show, feel free to leave your comments in the comment section on Facebook, and we will incorporate them inside of our conversation. And also feel free to leave us a voicemail at 857-600-0518 to weigh in on the discussion. Tonight, we will be joined by Intercept journalist Mattifies Schwartz, and we are going to discuss the firing of FBI Director James Comey. As you are aware of by now, Jim Comey was fired by President Donald Trump on yesterday. In a statement from President Trump, he said that he has received letters from the Attorney General and Deputy Attorney General recommending the dismissal as the director of the FBI. He has accepted their recommendations, and you are hereby terminated and removed effective immediately. This occurred while James Comey was engaging in a seminar in Los Angeles, and the news came to us that as he was giving the seminar, it flashed on the screen behind him that he had been fired. Jim Comey had not heard anything about this, and so he thought that it was a prank. He thought it was a joke, but unfortunately for him, it was not a joke, and he was terminated. There are a couple of statements here that we want to go over so that we can get a better understanding of why the White House claims he was fired. We're also going to dive into a conversation as to the timing, because I think that's just as important here in this conversation. Why now? Particularly because this firing on this day is actually going to put more political pressure on Donald Trump than it would have if he did not fire James Comey. So we're going to discuss that in great detail as we go on. In his statement, he went on to say something that was interesting. We'll pull it up on your screen here. President Trump said, "While I greatly appreciate you informing me on 3 separate occasions that I am not under investigation, I nevertheless concur with the judgment of the Department of Justice that you are not able to effectively lead the Bureau." This came as a result of the memorandum from Deputy Attorney General Ron Rosenstein. Ron Rosenstein wrote a memo to the Attorney General Jeff Sessions, and this is what it said. He said that the director laid out his version of the facts in regard to Hillary Clinton's emails. He said the director laid out his version of the facts for the news media as if it were being a closing argument, but without a trial. It is a textbook example of what federal prosecutors and agents are taught not to do. So this is the order of events. This is what happened. So it was reported today, I believe by the New York Times, that as soon as Ron Rosenstein was sworn into office about 2 weeks ago, he immediately began to look into Director James Comey. And in this investigation into James Comey, he found several egregious errors that he felt made Comey unqualified to serve as the director of the FBI. The irony of this that jumps out to everyone is the fact that the errors for which James Comey was fired are tied to the emails of Hillary Clinton and the way that Jim Comey presented this to the public during the election. The irony here is that if those emails had any impact, or if how James Comey presented that information to the public had any impact on the election, it had a negative impact on Hillary Clinton's campaign and a positive impact for Donald Trump. That is the most ironic thing in this entire conversation, that James Comey is being fired by the Trump administration for something that he did that quite possibly helped him become president. In the statement from Rod Rosenstein, he went on to say that this was a compounding error. The director ignored long-standing principles that we do not hold press conferences to release derogatory information about the subject of a declined criminal investigation. Derogatory information sometimes is disclosed in the course of criminal investigations and prosecutions, but we never release it gratuitously. And this is the basis of Jim Comey being fired. This morning in a press interview, Donald Trump was asked about this in the White House, and he said that Jim Comey was doing a bad job. Well, here's the thing. We all have seen the video. We've all seen the conversations, not only by President Trump, but also by Attorney General Jeff Sessions, where they commended James Comey on the very act, for the very thing that they later fired him on. This is staggering. This is staggering because it shows the political dexterity, if you would. It shows the willingness of the Trump administration, just like many other politicians, to turn on a dime and to flip their position when they feel that it's politically expedient for them. They are able to, in the heat of the moment, when it benefited them, they are able to cheer on James Comey and to say that it was brave for him to do this, for him to come out and to say these things about Hillary Clinton. And then when it was no longer in their best interest, they decided to get rid of James Comey for various reasons. We're going to be joined by Mattifies Schwartz to discuss this in more detail. But there's one more thing that I want to pull up before we actually bring him on. I want to mention the timing. The timing of this is fascinating because it really does not benefit Donald Trump to have fired James Comey yesterday. If anything, it puts a lot more political pressure on Jim Comey, on President Trump. It puts a lot of pressure on him because they are now demanding from different sides of the aisles. They are demanding that a special prosecutor, an independent prosecutor, be brought in to investigate the allegations into ties and collusion with Russia. This has been amplified by the firing of James Comey. And so it's very fascinating to see that they made this decision at this time, even though the blowback from it could be politically detrimental, to say the least. So that's where we are. And this is the conversation that is going on across the country. What is next? What's going to happen next? Where do we go from here? Will there be a special prosecutor? In order to get a special independent prosecutor, there needs to be a majority in Senate for them to be able to get this. And it currently looks like there's not going to be the majority. Mitch McConnell, Senate Majority Leader, has already said that there will not be a special prosecutor. In the New York Times, they're reporting that outright calls for a special prosecutor, 0 Republicans and 125 Democrats are calling for it. Calls for an independent investigation. There are 5 Republicans right now calling for it, with 81 Democrats who are calling for it as well. People who have stated they have questions or concerns. 34 Republicans said that they have questions or concerns, 15 Democrats, and those who are neutral or support, 71 Republicans are neutral on the issue, opposed to 0 Democrats. So this is, for lack of a better phrase, this is breaking down along party lines as to who is really interested in seeing if this is going to go to a special prosecutor. But there is support for an independent investigation from a small group of Republicans, 5 Republicans, who are now calling for an independent investigation. We have a comment here from our chat room, and we'll bring that up on our screen so we can get everyone involved. Amin said, yes, The Intercept, hope to see more live videos from you. Thanks so much for your feedback. We definitely appreciate the feedback, and we want to get your input on the conversation. What do you think about this? What do you think about the timing of this? This is what jumps out the most to me, is that Donald Trump does this, and it doesn't make the investigation go away, right? It doesn't make the investigation go away, and in fact, it actually amplifies the demands for the investigation. So the timing of it is not so much suspect because it's detrimental to Donald Trump, but it's very curious. Why would Donald Trump do this, and did he even consider the ramifications of this decision? It seems as though the call for James Comey to be fired were haste. They were quick. They did not consider the blowback, or they did not play this out, game this out, and see what would happen. They seemed genuinely shocked to see that the Democrats were using this as an opportunity to call for an investigation, an independent investigation. That suggests to me that perhaps they did not think this all the way through and did not consider that this move could actually make his Russia investigation allegations, rather, even more passionate from the Democratic Party. We're joined now by, okay, actually we lost him. Okay, so we're going to get him back. Okay, we're going to get him back and discuss his article in The Intercept today, which actually brings, the article I think was actually fascinating. We have him back. All right, so let's bring Mattifies Schwartz up into the conversation. Mattifies, first of all, thanks so much for joining me. How are you today?
I'm good. Yeah, glad to be here. Thanks, man.
Thanks so much for joining me to have this conversation. So in your article today, you discussed all the pertinent information with regard to James Comey, the firing, the timing, but you also brought up something else. In the letter that Donald Trump wrote, he actually said that he's basing this decision on a recommendation from the Deputy Attorney General as well as the Attorney General. But in actuality, there was no recommendation from the Deputy Attorney General. He just outlined the case for it. Tell me a little bit about your article and that little nugget that you found.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's sort of a confusing story with Trump trying to sort of pass the buck and also own this decision at the same time. After Trump fired Jim Comey, the White House released these 3 documents. One was a letter from Donald Trump, one was a letter from the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, and one was a long memo from Jeff Sessions as deputy. So the letter from Trump said, it was very short and it was even a little bit sarcastic, and it said, Jim Comey, you've told me 3 times that I'm not a subject of investigation, and I appreciate that, but nevertheless, I'm firing you on the basis of this from my Attorney General. So then he points to the Sessions document. And then the Sessions document is also very short and very vague. And it says, I've conducted an evaluation and I received this recommendation from my deputy, Rod Rosenstein, and then, but it doesn't really say or analyze what that was. So then there's this long letter from the deputy. It's a long memorandum. But what that letter does not say is that Jim Comey should be fired.
Right.
It says that Jim Comey behaved badly, but it doesn't actually say in there that the proper course of action would be to get rid of him.
And that's the interesting factor here, because Attorney General Jeff Sessions has ostensibly removed himself, recused himself from anything related to Russia, and it seems as though this is a conflict with that recusal. What were your thoughts on that?
That's right. Now he's also going to be directly involved, it appears, in picking Jim Comey's replacement. The new head of the FBI. We've got an acting director now, but Trump is going to name someone new, and it looks like Sessions is going to be a part of that selection, which also goes against this idea that he's recused himself, which is something that he promised to do.
Right. Right. So what does that say, or what does that do for us in terms of the next step? Like, they've gotten rid of James Comey, but they haven't gotten rid of the investigation, and the justification for why they got rid of James Comey really, they make a case. The Deputy Attorney General, he does make a case, and that case
there is a case in that letter.
Absolutely, and it aligns with what many commentators, journalists, and politicians were saying at the time of, I believe, July 5th, when James Comey came out in the first place. So he makes a convincing case. However, the irony of it just screams at us, and the timing of it really screams at us even louder. What are your thoughts there? Yeah, go ahead. Give me your thoughts there.
So the question is, so what next? We know that there is a grand jury meeting right now in the Eastern District of Virginia, and they're collecting evidence. They're looking at Michael Flynn's contacts with the Russian government and potentially other members of Trump's transition team. And they're trying to decide, this is what grand juries do, whether or not they're going to indict Michael Flynn and potentially some other people. And that investigation is going to keep going under the under the head of the Eastern District of Virginia, who I believe is Dana Buente. And then there's also rumors that there may be, and these are just rumors, but there may be a second grand jury meeting in New York that's also looking at some Trump transition matters and foreign investment. So those investigations will keep going in the Department of Justice. But Comey was the main person, who was overseeing them. The other person, the head of the National Security Division, was Mary McCord. She left and was replaced by someone. So at the upper levels, there's been an awful lot of turnover. Right. And then there's a question of whether, can the president just keep firing people until he gets someone who he wants? And I think it's really hard to look at this and say that Russia is not what's driving it. That he's not, that he thinks, I mean, it was reported today, actually, that he felt like Comey was focusing too much on Russia and not enough on these leak investigations or this unmasking controversy. I mean, Trump's made it very clear. He wants someone in these jobs who will answer to him.
There's a piece from the Politico today that discussed exactly that James Comey was not expressing a certain level of allegiance to Donald Trump that he was expecting, one, and then two, that he was not making the Russia investigation go away. At least this is according to Politico. You know, how do we, you know, you as a journalist, me as a commentator, and people in this conversation in general, how do we look at the excuse that was given for the firing of James Comey and reconcile that with the reality of everything that's going on around it? And, you know, the justification seems solid, but it doesn't seem sincere. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, Trump does directly reference Russia in his letter. He says, well, you've informed me 3 times that, you know, I'm not the subject, that I'm not being investigated in the Russia matter. And he's also, Trump has like changed his Twitter background to include quotes from Clapper about there being no collusion. He put that on his Twitter and he took it off. This is on the last 36 hours. And I think this has been a very sort of difficult time for the president personally. And I think he's like making a lot of rapid fire decisions that may or may not be in his interest. I mean, obviously, if he really wanted to take people's attention away from the Russia investigation, this and a lot of people would say would be like a pretty stupid thing to do.
Absolutely.
Would be to fire the FBI director when there's so much news coming out about it right now, and when everyone's going to attribute the decision to that. But I mean, a lot of people are saying it's a pretty serious miscalculation on his part.
Yeah, which makes us beg the question, you know, why? You know, was there anyone around him, just politically, right? We're not talking about the substance of the case. Let's set all that aside. Let's set Russia aside. Let's just talk about Donald Trump as a president who has to make decisions that are both based on policy, but also politics. And on the political spectrum of this conversation, this to me shouts and screams as one of the most ill-informed decisions of a president that I've seen, because it puts a spotlight directly on the issue that he should want to go away. So how does the president of the United States do this? He had to have done this in isolation almost, because I'm sure there's plenty of smart people around him who are yelling at him and letting him know that this will backfire. I mean, game that out for me. How does he make this decision when it's ultimately going to hurt him more than it will help him?
Well, I mean, in some ways, you know, he's engaged in all this bad behavior during the campaign, during his presidency. This is definitely, you know, one of the craziest, if not the craziest thing he's ever done. But, you know, we remember, like, he was talking about Judge Curiel in that lawsuit during the campaign. The judge, the American judge of Hispanic descent, the president, he was actually overseeing a matter that the president's own company, the president, you know, he was not the president at that point. He was a Republican nominee. And Trump doubled and tripled down, you know, denigrating this guy's Mexican heritage, and he could have apologized, but instead he just kept, and it seemed like he was getting deeper and deeper, and he pulled himself out of that rut somehow. I think in the past he's been rewarded for bad behavior, and he really hasn't like experienced any pushback. I mean, he has almost this punk sensibility where if something is forbidden, or if something is expected of him because of decorum or because of norms, he has an urge to violate and shatter,
right,
you know, those norms. Right. That's just his pattern of behavior. And then everything's really contingent to him. Relationships, policy positions. I don't think he's changed so much on so many issues and on so many people. And I think having someone as independent as Comey and who's been around for so long and who knows so much as Comey, I think it must have been you know, as the Russia thing progressed, a pretty uncomfortable presence for him to have in his sphere. So it may have just reached a point where he had to just kind of like psychically eject the guy, because it was like too much for him to deal with personally. And there's no one in the White House who was going to tell him no, because he's gotten rid of all those people also.
And so he's in a position where he's able to make these decisions without counsel, without advice from advisors, and puts himself in a situation.
This is the essence of the Donald Trump brand, right? Like, I'm the man behind the desk. I'm going to do whatever I want. No one's going to tell me like, you know, who to fire. This is sort of what he's built it on. And, you know,
Right.
and any time like a Paul Manafort or a Steve Bannon has risen up, he's pushed those people away. I mean, the only people he's really consistently kept close through his career are family.
Right. Interesting. We have a couple of comments and questions from the chat room on Facebook. We'll pull them up on our screen now. Ray Snyder from Facebook says, who's telling the president what to do? And I think that's a substantive question. It's a short question, but it's very substantive when we consider our conversation that we just had. Who is informing, who advised the president on this decision on yesterday based on who's left, practically? You know, he's gotten rid of a lot of people, and he's surrounding himself, for lack of a better phrase, with yes men and yes women. But who's helping him here? Who's left?
Well, certainly Jeff Sessions. The White House released a timeline this afternoon that showed that Trump and Sessions met the day before this decision to talk it over. This is certainly a decision that the Sessions could have put his foot down or said there was a price to pay, or even in some universe resigned over and didn't. So Sessions, if Trump, at a minimum, I would say, is a kind of enabler of this decision. And then I think it's the media cycle. I think a lot of it's television. We know that Trump watches a great deal of cable news. We know that on Monday there was this hearing with Sally Yates, where Yates was putting Flynn's contacts with Russia back at the top of the news cycle. And one thing we've seen over and over again from Donald Trump, whenever he's losing control of the media narrative, he takes some kind of drastic action. He makes an outrageous tweet. You know, he makes some giant personnel decision. So I think it's possible that he was just listening to the TV and felt like, you know, that he was losing control of sort of the public consciousness and felt like he had to make a move to show, you know, everyone who is still the boss. I mean, I'm psychologizing a little bit here, but I do think that the Yates hearing on Monday had something to do with it. Yeah,
and unfortunately, we have no choice but to try to delve into the thinking of Donald Trump, because any rational observer would see how irrational this decision was, particularly at the timing, especially because of the negative ramifications for Donald Trump. We have no choice but to sit back. And for me, and I would like your commentary on this, for me, it screams danger. Because if he's willing to make a hasty decision, an irrational decision, based on, I don't know what information he had in front of him that made him think this was good, but this was a bad choice, and he even echoed that, saying that he was surprised by the blowback and just surprised by the dissent from the Democrats. If he's willing to do that with a situation like this, that's really connected to him personally, I'm afraid of what he would do in other situations. Who is he going to ignore? Is he not going to take sound counsel? Is there going to be anyone smart around him left? Because this is not just about Russia at this point. This is also about every other issue, every other foreign policy issue. There's going to be any number of emergencies that he's going to have to make a sound decision. And this really screams that he's not a good decision maker. What are your thoughts there?
No, I think those are all excellent points. I mean, there's also the question of, assuming, you know, we make it through the Trump years, the presidency that he's going to leave behind is not the presidency that he inherited. And these are some pretty serious precedents that he's setting. Before this, the only time a president had fired an FBI director, there was a 130-page report from the FBI's own Office of Professional Responsibility saying that William Sessions, the FBI director under President Clinton, had some ethical lapses. So going from that to this kind of situation where the president can just say, you know what, I don't like this guy, put together a memo so that we can get rid of him. I mean, that really changes things. The FBI director it's an extremely powerful post. It was, you know, before yesterday, one of the last kind of nonpartisan, you know, civil service positions at the high levels of the intelligence community that we had. The CIA director used to be that way, and that sort of changed after the second Iraq war. And so Trump he's really, you know, doing some damage to our institutions and to the way these things will be handled in the future, I think.
We have one last comment here from Facebook concerning the managerial style of President Trump, and it says from Alan, he says that Trump is just a bad manager. He relies on fierce loyalty, which allows for his poor leadership skills to go unchecked. I see this all the time. Some people like to scam out of corners but that style is only successful in limited environments. And I think that's a very apropos comment, because this is what it boils down to. He's trying to translate what worked for him in the private sector into government, but we're talking about decisions that have far-reaching ramifications, and the implications. There's everyone in the country, right? We're not talking about a board of chairmen. We're not talking about stockholders. We're talking about every single person in the country that chooses to tune in and be interested. They have something to say about this. What do you think about his managerial style transitioning from corporate America to the White House?
No, I think you're right, Ben, on all those considerations. It would have been nice if someone had told him that stuff beforehand, but he seems to sort of like to learn on the fly. Yeah. I will say that, he's a quick study at, as we learned during the campaign. He's incredibly pragmatic, and his sort of flexibility or lack of any ideological commitments have made him able to change to transition from the campaign environment to the Washington environment. If you look at like his policy on Asia or NATO, he used to be this like isolationist nativist, and then he just like threw that out the window, and now he just wants a little bit more money from allies, and he's basically towing the line. But in this case, he did not receive very good counsel, and it may, I wouldn't be surprised if this were the beginning of the end of his presidency. It's not hard to imagine that happening, and I think a lot of Democrats are just sort of waiting for the right moment now to get impeachment proceedings underway. It would not surprise me at all to see something like that happen in the next 20 to 30 days.
Interesting. Thanks so much. This has been Matt Schwartz from the Intercept. Listen, thanks so much for taking your time out this afternoon to speak to me.
It's been great. I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Hey, my pleasure. If you want to weigh in on the discussion, please leave your comment in the comments section, or you can leave us a voicemail at 857-600-0518. We have another comment here from the Facebook chat. I believe we have it. This is from Charles. He says, isn't this FBI director story just a distraction from the escalation of the war in Afghanistan? I hear this argument a lot. Almost on everything that Donald Trump does, someone says that this is a distraction. And not to dismiss it, there may be some merits there. There may be something to that. But the opposite side of the equation is that this is a big deal, right? This is not a little thing. And so it would be using something that could actually destroy Donald Trump as a means of distracting from something else that probably would not destroy Donald Trump. One thing that we've seen, particularly with our media, is the willingness to embrace a warring president, a president who will send troops, a president who will launch missiles. The media is definitely impressed with that. And so this incident, what he's done with James Comey, is far more taxing on his polling, far more taxing on demands from the media for clarification. It's far more taxing. So for this to be a distraction, that's like using something, you're destroying your home to distract for something that you messed up in the background. So that's my take. Just something here, 1 second. This is a statement from Comey. Okay, so this is just coming up to us now, and this is coming from CNN. This is from former Director Comey. He says, to all, I have long believed that a president can fire an FBI director for any reason or for no reason at all. I'm not going to spend time on the decision and the way it was executed. I hope you won't either. It is done, and I will be fine, although I will miss you and the mission deeply. I have said to you before that in times of turbulence, the American people should see the FBI as a rock of competence, honesty, and independence. What makes leaving the FBI hard is the nature and the quality of its people who make it the rock for America. It is very hard to leave a group of people who are committed only to doing the right thing. My hope is that you will continue to live our values and the mission of protecting the American people and upholding the Constitution. If you do that, you too will be sad when you leave, and the American people will be safer. Working with you has been the greatest joys of my life, one of the greatest joys of my life. Thank you all for that gift, Jim Comey. So that's breaking from CNN, a statement from former director of the FBI, James Comey, to his colleagues at the FBI. This is the first time that we've heard from James Comey on the issue since being fired on yesterday. We still want to get your feedback. Want to know what you think about this. 857-600-0518 to leave us a voicemail, and you also feel free to leave comments in the chat room. There's a lot of other news that's happening surrounding this particular story, as well as other pressing political issues. Here's a story that has gone unnoticed, slightly unnoticed, and I think that's a very significant story. There was a reporter who was arrested in West Virginia after persistently asking questions of Secretary Tom Price. Tom Price is the Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services, and he was in Charleston, West Virginia on yesterday to meet with officials there. During his exit, a reporter, Dan Heyman, from the Public News Service, followed Price down a hallway and was trying to ask him about the Republican health care plan that recently passed Congress. In this exchange, he used a cell phone as a microphone, as an audio recorder, and he reached over the staff trying to get answers to the questions. He asked whether, the specific question he asked was whether domestic violence was going to be a pre-existing condition underneath the legislation. Now, before we get into any more of the details of what happened, he was arrested. He was arrested and he was charged with a misdemeanor. He had to pay a $5,000 bail to get out after spending 8 hours in jail for doing his job. The local authorities there stated that he was no longer in a public space. The reporter contests that. He says that he was in a public space and he was doing his job as a journalist and expressing his First Amendment right to do so. He was arrested. The local authorities in West Virginia stated that he crossed over into the area, into the space of the Secret Service. When the Secret Service was questioned by the New York Times, the Secret Service redirected the question to the local authorities, which suggested, obviously, they not only had nothing to say, but if I were to editorialize, I'm quite sure the Secret Service is accustomed to handling journalists on any given day of the week. This jumps out to us because it seems to be just another step in the willingness to suppress speech and the willingness to use this method as a means of controlling a narrative and to control our media. This really is not a story that should go unnoticed. Not to say that FBI Director Comey being fired is a distraction by any measure, but something like this is a direct threat to journalists, to American citizens across the country. Every single one of us, citizen journalists, people who want to get answers to questions. If the questions are not if the answers are not forthcoming, we need a media that is journalists that are able to press for answers. I'm reminded of Andrea Mitchell of MSNBC when she was asking questions of Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, and she could not get answers. Not only did she not get answers, but she was escorted out. And so this is a time for journalists and the media in general to press like they've never pressed before. In fact, if I were to correct my own statement right there, we should have been doing this all along. For every administration, we must hold power accountable. And it's events like this that sends a chill down the spines of anyone who has ever pressed into a crowd in order to get an answer from a politician or a policymaker. It sends chills down their spines because they realize that they could be next. And what do they have to do? How many hours do they have to spend in jail? How much would they have to post in bail because local authorities felt as though you were violating the private space of a public official? So we want to keep our eyes on this story to see how it pans out. The ACLU has come out and stated that it is a blatant attempt to chill an independent and free press. They went on to say the charges against him are outrageous and they must be dropped immediately. And again, the Secret Service had no comment. They referred it back to the local West Virginia authorities. We definitely want to keep our eyes on that because if nothing else, we need our media, we need our journalists to be as free as possible to get the answers that we need to get. 857-600-0518 if you want to leave us a voicemail on the conversation, and you can also leave us a comment, a new comment in the section, the chat room below, so that we can get your input. There's a comment here from Matthew. He says, do I believe that the values that America has stood for since its inception are under attack? I almost want to punt on that one because You know, I think that we always have to be vigilant. We always have to be vigilant. And I don't want to be the person to say that this is something new. There are some unique things that are happening underneath the Trump administration that we need to be wary of, without question. And I'm not trying to draw an equivalence between Trump and former President Obama, but I find it refreshing to have journalists who are doing journalism now, that are demanding answers, that are doing follow-up questions, that are not just taking no or not just leaving it there. They're doing investigative research. They're doing what journalism and journalists rather should have done all along. And the thing that bothers me, or the thing that concerns me the most, is something that I actually had a chance to talk with Glenn Greenwald about when on our very first interview, is as we go into this Trump era, everyone is hyper vigilant, as we should be. But that doesn't mean that once we get someone else in the White House that we should put down our vigilance. The media, where they are right now, journalists where they are right now, it's my firm belief that they need to stay this way no matter who is in power, no matter what the party of the president is, no matter how great of a person they may seem. We need journalists who are going to press the issue every single day on our behalf. And to Matthew, that's the best way to ensure, that's the best way for us to ensure that our American values are never under attack such that they are removed from us. Actually, that's a great question. And we want to know more from you. The Intercept Live is really about you as the viewer. What are your thoughts? What are your questions? Because one thing I've learned as I've done this over the last few years is that some of the best insights that we could possibly get come from you in the audience. Some of the best conversations that I've had have been stimulated as a result of a caller or a voicemail or a comment in the YouTube chat or a Twitter chat where someone is chiming in from their perspective. Because one thing I've learned is that people in the audience, while you may not have a grasp of every single issue, what I have learned, and it's a fascinating thing, is that the issue that you're passionate about, you have become your own expert on. And so the feedback that we get from you has always been enriching to the conversation. And so as we go forward in the next few episodes of the Intercept Live, we want to make sure that you feel as free to engage as we really desire for you to be engaged. All right, let's shift gears with one last story. And I have to start here. I am extremely proud to have attended Bethune-Cookman University in Daytona Beach, Florida. I only had a chance to attend for 2 years. Life circumstances demanded that I transfer and do some other things, but that's neither here nor there. I am proud today of my school that I still call home, that I still have those lifelong relationships and friendships with students that marched in the band with me there in Daytona Beach. And on today, I am even prouder by how the graduating class of 2017 stood up for what they believed in protest against the commencement speech being given by Betsy DeVos, the Secretary of Education. There was controversy from the very moment the university announced that she was coming to speak. And the controversy, it really resonates on several levels. It's controversial because not only who she is as an individual, what she stands for, what she fights for, and what she's fought for all of her life is problematic in and of itself, but it's also problematic because who she represents. Who she represents is in many ways antithetical to the mission of Bethune-Cookman University. And so from the moment the president, Dr. Jackson, announced that Betsy DeVos was going to be the commencement speaker, there was a mass movement of former students, alumni, friends, family, and current students putting together a protest, putting together a petition to stop this. Unfortunately, they were not able to stop it. And in fact, a local news station was reporting that according to the NAACP, the students, the graduating class, was threatened with not receiving their diplomas, their degrees, if they walked out of the commencement ceremony. And so this is what happened today. Betsy DeVos showed up to speak, and I want to play a clip of the response that she got from my family there at Bethune-Cookman University. Let's take a listen.
Dr. Jackson, Board of Trustees, thank you so very, very much for this great honor and privilege. I am honored to become a Wildcat.
And so there's a lot more to it, and we will play more, but I wanted to stop there because when she said that she's honored to be a Wildcat, the university offered her an honorary degree, and so this is customary, but this is what started everything in motion. When she said, I'm proud to be a Wildcat, to everyone who protested, to everyone who opposed her, to everyone who opposed President Trump, this was a slap in the face. And so what happened immediately after, not only were there boos, not only was there dissent in the audience, but the graduating class themselves stood up and turned their backs to Betsy DeVos. And I want you to watch the video and see the energy of these students.
Thank you so very, very much for this
Oh, yeah.
privilege.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Do it again, man. Do it again. 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 Do it again.
That warms my heart. It warms my heart because not just because I went to Bethune-Cookman, not just because on policy after policy after policy I disagree vehemently with Betsy DeVos, but it warms my heart because these students were going to pay a price. And you'll see the clip momentarily, but the students were going to pay a price, but they felt like their voices had to be heard. And they were willing to pay that price for their voices to be heard. And because they could not get on stage, and challenge what Betsy DeVos was going to say, nor were they ever going to be given a platform to challenge her policies. Some of those policies which are going to directly affect their financial future, they were not given a platform to challenge her, and so they did the only thing they could do, which was stand up and turn their backs to a person that across the board, thousands of people across the country vehemently opposed this commencement speech. In one way, the other layer of this conversation that I feel is so substantive is with this conversation that the people who disagree with this act often bring to the table. What they bring to the table is the fact that, you know, people should be willing to sit and listen to people that they disagree with. And generally, I agree with that. But there comes a time when you no longer are required to force yourself to be exposed to conversations, commentary that are diametrically opposed to everything that you stand for. And we as Americans, we are in this place where we're trying to figure out the balance between a person's First Amendment right to say whatever they believe and our First Amendment right to challenge what they say. And in this case today, Betsy DeVos was not denied her platform, but the students of Bethune-Cookman University were not denied their opportunity to speak as well. And this is why I am proud. Now, this is the price that they had to pay. This is the issue that is really resonating with quite a few community organizers in the city of Daytona Beach. This is the president, President Jackson, speaking, having to intercede on behalf of Betsy DeVos, and this is what he had to say.
If this behavior continues, your degrees will be mailed to you.
And this was the threat that was reported by the NAACP, and this is exactly what the president said on stage. Ironically, I think most people who have graduated understand that your degrees are mailed to you anyway. And so it was an idle threat, yet it shows you the division. It shows you the divide between the administration and the students who had the temerity to stand up and say that they will not sit idly by or quietly by and say nothing. And so they protested. And for that, I am so proud of the class, the graduating class of 2017 at Bethune-Cookman University. I'm proud to be a Wildcat. And I'm proud to have been at a school that has such a rich history and legacy. And one of the things that comes to mind for every single person who disagreed with this decision to bring Betsy DeVos was Betsy DeVos's comments with regards to HBCUs, historically black colleges and universities. She made the comment to say that HBCUs were pioneers of school choice. And in actuality, HBCUs were not pioneers. They did not come around to give people a choice. They came around because we had no choice. They came around because in the height of segregation, in the height of Jim Crow, black children were not able to get a higher education. And so HBCUs had to be formed, not to give us some philosophical choice between public and private, but so that we could get an education in the first place. And Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune was a pioneer in that regard, in that world. What she started in 1904 with a small group of girls and just a handful of money has reverberated throughout the decades and benefited people that we will never know, including myself. It was the education that I got at Bethune-Cookman College that placed me on a path, to do the things that I'm doing now. It was the groundwork. In fact, it was the enriching conversations. It was the challenging. It was being challenged by my professors. I didn't get that when I transferred to another school. I didn't get that challenging. I didn't get that robust care and concern for my future that I would have gotten if I had gone to any other school. I got it at Bethune-Cookman University. And for that, I am so proud of this group. And I want to just read for you a few comments from the last will and testament of Mary McLeod Bethune. And you will understand why we are so proud of that school today. She says in her last will and testament, she says, I ask myself if I have any other legacy to leave. Truly, my worldly possessions are few, yet my experiences have been rich. From them, I have distilled principles and policies which I firmly believe will represent my life's work. And she said, so I leave you love. Love builds, it's positive, and it is helpful. I leave you with hope. I leave you the challenge of developing confidence in one another. I leave you a thirst for education. I leave you respect. I leave you respect for the uses of power. I leave you, in her last will and testament, I leave you faith. I leave you racial dignity. And she said, I have risen from the cotton fields of South Carolina to found a college, administer it in its years of growth, become a public servant, and in government of our country, and a leader of women. I would not exchange my color for all the wealth in the world. For had I been born white, I might not have been able to do all that I have done or yet hope to do. And she said, I leave you a desire to live harmoniously with your fellow men. And as I listened to the students speak today, I thought of what Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune would think about them. And I paused and thought what she would think about the administration bringing Betsy DeVos to the school. I'm not sure what she would think about the president and the current administration, but I am confident of what she thinks about the students who stood up and protest. She said, I leave you finally a responsibility to our young people. The world around us really belongs to our youth, for youth will take us over into its future, into our future. Our children must never lose their zeal for building a better world. They must not be discouraged from aspiring towards greatness, for they are to be the leaders of tomorrow. Nor must they forget that the masses of our people are still underprivileged, ill-housed, impoverished, and victimized by discrimination. We have a powerful potential in our youth, and we must have the courage to change old ideas and practices so that we may direct their power towards good ends. I don't know what Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune would think about the administration, but I do know what she thinks about those young people. And if it was at all possible to be more proud than I am, she would be that. Thank you so much for joining us. We will see you next week. Have a good night.